Welcome to my channel. We are doing a little bit of an unscientific experiment here in DCS. Right off the bat, I do want to say that I know that this is an F-22 mod that we're using, and some of the characteristics may not be extremely accurate, and the AI behavior on either side, stealth or non-stealth, is not going to be necessarily very realistic. So there are some flaws to this test, but really the data that I'm going to get out of it, I think, is going to be decent in some ways, and that's really what I'm looking for, not necessarily the visuals, or and I'm not looking at DCS as if this is exactly what would happen in the real world. So right off the bat, that's what I want to say. I will talk about my setup here for a minute and kind of why I'm setting it up the way I am, and then we'll get into the experiment in itself. So what this is some F-22s on blue side, and then some Su-30s and J-11s on the other side. And this is sort of simulating something that I've referenced before, that was done by the RAND organization regarding stealth versus Generation 4 or 4 Plus. And so these Su-30s have a fairly standard loadout. Um, some of them do not have the loadout that I meant to do, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But there are 12 different groups of 4 each aircraft, so that should be 48 aircraft in the Su-30s, and then there are 6 different groups of 4 J-11As, and they have a different loadout than I intended as well, but it worked out. So yeah, that's 12 Su-30 groups and 6 J-11 groups, 4 each. And then over on this side, we have 6 groups of F-22As, and they have a fairly standard BVR stealth loadout. So, yeah, 24 of those aircraft. We're going to look at this in chart form. They're basically flying at each other and will engage whenever they choose to engage, and we'll see what happens. So in chart form, you'll notice I do have the 2 groups of Su-30s. That's because one aircraft in every single group got loaded out differently than I intended. It has 2 less missiles in each plane does, but it also has ECM. The J-11 has 2 less missiles than I intended, but it has ECM. Also, I meant to have more R-27ERs loaded on each one, but the AI tends to prefer thermal missiles anyway, I think. So it all worked out, but part of my experiment was that the flanker-style aircraft, especially modern flanker-style aircraft, can really carry a lot of missiles compared to even an F-15C, honestly. But especially compared to a stealth aircraft in stealth setup. So that was part of the deal, but you can see how many aircraft we had there and how many missiles each side had. And missiles per side is something I used to never really think about, but it does matter. And in an experiment that I'll do in the future, I think we'll see even more why it matters. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But the reason I have so many aircraft on one side compared to the other is because of this RAND study, and it's not a fair setup necessarily, but as we cycle through all these aircraft, it's not a fair setup necessarily, but I think that for this experiment it works because according to RAND and whoever did their research, or wherever they got their research, the biggest difference in numbers that you can overcome if you have superior training, superior skills, superior technology, or some combination of the 3, is 3-to-1 advantage. And that's what we have here, is a 3-to-1 advantage in terms of aircraft, which is typically how we measure that. But again, missiles per side does matter as well, in some ways. So but that's the reason that's the basic reason why I picked the numbers that I picked. The other reason is because there aren't that many stealth aircraft compared to conventional aircraft. They're expensive. They take a lot of money to build and to maintain, and probably more importantly, they have much lower sortie rates. So you literally can't get F-22s in the sky as often as you can get some, Gen 4 and Gen 4 Plus aircraft in the sky, depending on the aircraft. It just depends. But um, so that's kind of why I have this set up this way. There are a number of scenarios where we would not be able to have nearly as many F-22s in the sky as another side might have non-stealth aircraft in the sky. So the thought has always been that the F-22 can handle that, um, and I think we've got our first missiles away. Yep. So this is gonna get really crazy really fast. But uh, but yeah, a lot of people, we talk about this as if the F-22 can handle these larger numbers because it's stealth, and I think in some ways it can. There's a certain limit to it, but it should be able to handle superior numbers of aircraft depending on what those aircraft are and where they are and how many there are. Another flaw to what I'm doing here is that I don't believe there would ever be a situation where we had only F-22s in the sky. So it dramatically changes things if you have some F-16. Look at all those missiles. If you have some F-15s and F-16s in the sky with them, it dramatically changes the way things play out. So again, that's another flaw with this. That's another area where this is not very realistic. But there's J-11 killed, I think, another one. And we're going to go through this, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details on what's exactly happening here. I'm more looking for the data and and the outcome, so to speak. Also, you could run this exact same mission a few times, and it might turn out differently every time. But anyway, right off the bat, it kind of looks like the F-22s are getting the upper hand. So we'll see if it continues to play out that way, because we do have the red side aircraft coming in two waves, and that might or might not make a difference. It's also really hard to tell which aircraft is going after which aircraft. That's definitely not the aircraft that this one was going after. It looks like I think our second wave is engaged now. Second wave of red, I should say. Oh, yeah, we got smashed by 2 missiles there. While we're watching this play out, I will say also that the data that came out of DCS in the mission log file was a little bit dirty, and I don't know, I don't have a lot of experience reading those, so I might be misreading parts of it, but there were some logged events that didn't make a lot of sense, and there were times when an aircraft seemed to hit itself 14, well, not 14 times, I'm exaggerating, 4 times. Um, oh, before it died. So there were some unlabeled events that didn't have initiators and stuff like that. So it's a little dirty, but I scrubbed it manually and made the most sense out of it I could. And I think for the most part it makes sense. But here, as you can see, and we'll see this again in TAC view, but as you can see, the red side is just sort of mopping up the F-22s at this point. The 3-to-1 advantage, they very easily overcame, the red side had enough skill and equipment, I suppose in this case, to not allow the blue side to overcome the 3-to-1 advantage. I guess you could say it that way. So the AI is really missile happy too. That's something that I've learned from this. I should have known it before, I guess, but man, the AI, they like to throw the missiles out. And I think that's it. So these guys swarm over to the tankers and the AWACS and kill them too, but we'll go right into the TAC view here. Okay, let's take a look at it here. We're not going to get into too many details here. I'll point out a few things through the battle, but there's just too much going on. So just like in the live feed, we're not going to look at too much here as well. So here we have our first shot. Actually, it's a touch before this at around right here is when the missile actually comes off the rail, I believe. And I don't know who he's firing at, but we're at about 28.5 miles, I think, to what's probably the nearest aircraft. So now you see all of these guys coming off the rails. It's like a wall of missiles out here. And here we see our first defensive maneuvering. And I counted earlier, there are 57 AMRAAMs in the sky right now. 57 AMRAAMs from, where'd my data go? From 24 aircraft. So they fired more than 2 AMRAAMs apiece. They're spam firing these things, which, you know, I don't know. That will explain the P sub K that we see. But anyway, we've got 57-0 at the moment, and we've got some defensive maneuvering. And then at 2 hours, 48 and 11. Whoops. Right in here, we've got our first missile shot by the red team. And I think it's one of these guys. Yep, it's this guy right here. And then right after he fires, I think this guy, oh, this guy fires. Okay. So anyway, this range is at about 10.5 nautical miles. So our red team doesn't fire at all until about 10.5 miles range. Okay, so then the first kill happens there. You saw it right here. And now all pandemonium is going to break loose. They're flashing all over the sky, and then right here, our first F-22 gets killed here. So we saw, and I didn't keep a live score or anything like that. I kind of wish that I would have, but we've got, I'm going to try to see, there's one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I think 10, maybe 9, because some of the missiles were hitting already destroyed aircraft, and so some of the data was kind of goofy. So either 9 or 10 of the red aircraft have died now to the one F-22 Raptor. So at this stage of the fight, truthfully, the blue team is doing better because the red team outnumbers them 3-1. So if they can kill 10 for every one, then they're good. So at the start of the fight, it's looking like blue team is going to take the lead because they're still killing lots of red aircraft here. We saw like 3 or 4 already. I think, yep, there's another one. So I don't know, we're at like an additional 6 or so. Then we get another Raptor killed. So again, I don't want to necessarily go into high detail here because there's too much going on. But as of right now, the blue team definitely has an advantage if they can keep up this rate of killing. And but then we start losing some blue team members pretty fast here. Possibly because they've scrubbed off too much energy, possibly because they're running out of missiles. Possibly because they're focused on one target instead of the ones that are firing at them. I don't really know. But in the end, the red team makes a big comeback. And it could be because the red team was staggered in 2 waves. That might have been part of what the deal was. But anyway, as you can see, they just swarmed blue team, got the last few kills, and then they go after the these guys out here. There's them, there's them, there's them. Okay, I do kind of like watching this at high speed because it just looks like something from a space movie or something, you know. Somewhere in here, whoops, let's turn this down. Yep, right in here. Okay, I'm going to focus on these three aircraft. I noticed this while I was watching things, and so this guy is firing an AIM-120 somewhere over here, probably at one of these guys way out here. This guy is turning to try to get in behind this guy, and this guy is firing an AIM-9X at his buddy, right? Let me put this. My goodness, it's hard to see. Which one was it? Golly, there's missiles everywhere. Was it this guy? Oh, sorry, it's way back here. So, different altitude. So he's pointed down. I'm not exactly sure who he's firing at. It doesn't appear to be that good of a shot. But the part that I thought was kind of dangerous was right between, not quite between, but sort of between this guy and this guy is this guy. So, and what it looks like happens is, I think this missile tracks either that airplane or it might be tracking this missile. It looks like it's trying to pull lead at first, but then it just turns. Like it could have killed this guy, but it just turns. So I don't know what was going on there, but I just find it interesting that the AI just, they don't care, man. It's walls of missiles, you know. So I put together some charts of the missiles fired over time, and this is each type of missile, each shot, each hit, and each kill. And it gets a little busy, but as you can see, AIM-120s got fired at a much higher rate than other missiles. So if we zoom in, we can see that even zoomed in, the rest of it is a mess. So I grouped them by side and type, and then I took out the hits. And it's a little bit cleaner. I still don't know that this data is that worthwhile, but it could be interesting. You can pause the video and kind of look at it and study it if you want, and ask more questions if you want. This is zoomed in again so that we can see everything but the AMRAAM shots, basically. But the real data that I was kind of interested in was the P-sub-Ks, and so this is broken down by missile type, by medium range radar, medium range thermal, short range thermal, you know, in the green group there, kind of in the middle. It's broken down by blue versus red, and it's broken down by blue radar, blue thermal, red radar, red thermal. So you can kind of see the P-sub-Ks. If we multiply out the P-sub-Ks by the total number of those types of missiles on each side, we can see the total potential kills or total probable kills, depending on how you want to look at that. And so for the blue side, we can really only expect 54 kills unless we increase that P-sub-K. And from the red side, in this scenario, we can see 140 kills in total. And so this is kind of where we get into the idea of, in this scenario, the red team can just kind of ignore the blue team, because the blue team can't kill all of the red team. It's impossible. So, and that's going to lead into kind of the next video that I want to try to do. So this is a good segue into that. And again, I do want to say that this isn't that realistic of a scenario in real life, and there's an infinite number of possible scenarios, but in real life, the kind of scenario that I'm setting up here would really, both sides would be augmented by more forces, by different airplanes, by different support structures and things like that. So it's not, again, it's not meant to be a super realistic situation. I was really just interested in the basic outcome and the data so that we can try to figure out what would happen in other scenarios, and again, mostly just to sort of spur some good conversation and some good thought experiments. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful or enjoyable at least, and happy flying.